My dad, his generation, they were like, remember where they were when, Kennedy was assassinated, when man landed on the moon, like big things. Like, what about your younger life? Well, I remember when OJ was in the slow speed chase. I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
All right, and welcome back to another edition of the Politics Unplugged podcast. This is a bit of an overtime edition from the TV show because it left off. It was getting kind of heated. Both of you gentlemen, I'm here with Marcus Dell'Artino, the resident Republican, and Tony Cani, the resident Democrat here. Got pretty heated on the show. We were really light on time, so I wanted to kind of bring up there and finish off that conversation. In the meantime, from the time we got done with the TV show and got up here to the podcast room, we got some new news here from Donald Trump, basically on his Truth Social, calling on the legislature, the governor, everybody here to repeal the 1864 territorial abortion ban law. Let's start with you, Marcus. Does this change everything? Because remember, if last week there was an effort to do that. And the House used a couple of procedural maneuvers to block that from happening. Does this change the game in this?
It's going to take a little bit more time before you change the game that dramatically. I mean, you're asking people. I mean, for instance, you just had Jake Hoffman on, leader of the Freedom Caucus, Arizona State Senator, basically asserting, hell no, we won't go, right?
Yeah.
And he's, well tied to President Trump and Turning Point. And, he's no shrinking violet, for God's sakes. And you're asking him to change his lifelong position on an issue, one that he's campaigned on. And that's not, you got Senator Kern, who's running for Congress, who's campaigned on being pro-life ever since he ever ran for office. I can't figure out how you get these guys to turn on a dime. So there's going to have to be a different solution. And maybe that's a couple Republicans maybe going along with the Democratic caucus and rolling leadership. But even that one, I have a tough time sort of getting my head wrapped around.
This is, look, it's bizarro world, right, Tony? I mean, let's think about this for a second. Donald Trump is asking the Democratic governor and Democrats in the legislature basically to do him a solid, right?
Yes, I don't think he looks at it like that, but yeah.
He'll take credit no matter what happens, which is bull.
Don't you think he honestly thinks that he can have these people change their minds and that entire Republican caucus?
Because you said, how is somebody going to change a lifelong held belief? And Donald Trump that's not a thing he has. He doesn't have lifelong held beliefs. He just sort of does whatever. And he got Carrie Lake is pretending like she didn't support this territorial ban, even though she was on the radio naming it by the ARS number, which is wild. And now she's like, I don't know. And so I think that's what they must be thinking. But I think the real reason he's motivated to do this is because of his ill-timed pivot on abortion, where he essentially endorsed whatever any state does. That's what he did. He says, like, whoa, the state should decide. And so now all of a sudden he's like, oh, I guess that doesn't work. And this is why I think the stronger message is going to be like, the Democrats want to codify Roe. You're going to need Democrats to take over the House and the Senate in order to get it. Biden's going to have to win again. And also, like, I'll tell you one other thing is that, like, the Democrats, it might not be politically expedient to take this issue off the table. But I will tell you, from the conversations I've had and things I know, Democrats are laser focused on trying to actually save lives on this. And so what this is having Democrats do is they are trying to do anything they can to get a 15-week ban, which I think they all oppose as too restrictive, on the books just so they can save lives over these next couple of months. And so I think that's one of the big differences here is that, like, there's politics being played on the right on this because they're terrified. And then the Democrats are like, okay, well, what do we need to find a way to save these lives. And so that's the position that we're in.
And I had Stephanie Stahl Hamilton on the TV show, and she was the Democrat this year that dropped a bill that would repeal that 1864 law. And I asked her a little bit about that and that whether or not she agreed with that with the current 15-week ban that provides no exceptions for rape or incest. And she said basically that is better than the near total ban. She's not happy with the 15-week ban. Obviously, she's going to be supporting the ballot initiative in the fall, which would protect abortion up to the point of fetal viability, 22 to 24 weeks, and provide exceptions for the life of the mother and the mental health of the mother in that. So, but she is saying that the 15-week ban is better than the almost total ban that's on the books now.
Well, it covers 90% of abortions, right? So yeah, it's better than what.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, Mark. I want to go back and then maybe go forward from the ruling. Well, I want to get your take on the ruling on that, because there was, I've covered a lot of news stories, and when I was on the ninth floor waiting for that ruling to come down, because we knew it was going to come down around 10 and the governor was going to have a press conference, there was legit shock and people stunned that the court came down to rule and to reinstate this law that dates back to the Civil War. I mean, it was a real shocker. Marcus, should we have been shocked? Should anybody have been shocked?
No. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Here's what I did. I went and talked to a bunch of attorneys, not one, not two, a bunch, who are very good in their field and actually, have been practicing for a long time. And I said, if you were a judge and you read this, how would you interpret it? And they said, I was interpreting this very just not being political about it. You've got to go back to the territorial law. And so I think had more people done that or had a discussion about that, they might have known what was coming. But to a certain extent, I'm a little surprised that everybody was so surprised.
And me too, because, eventually I got...
Who was surprised, though? The media?
Yeah, because...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually, like, when I've been talking to people who aren't on the media side, I think there's an expectation that this was going to happen just because of the fact that Republican legislators were being very clear about what their intent was. And if they were trying to figure out what the legislative intent was, they've said it out loud. Our intent is that this 1864 thing will become law again. And it's written there. It's very clear. Governor Ducey has tried to spin it. Oh, that's not what we meant. And he's been corrected on that. You have TJ Shope, who's a senator, saying first, oh, no, this isn't our legislative intent. But then when he's called out on it, he goes, well, okay, but, we just really didn't believe Roe would ever be overturned. And so I guess that's how we got here. But I don't have any regrets. So I do think that, and that's part of the reason why I think Democrats are so pissed off in the legislature, is they've been trying to fix this because they knew this was coming. And I think anyone who, maybe there was hope that a novel legal argument would help save some lives. Yeah. But I don't think that I'm not super shocked.
And I went back and I looked. We're talking about the bill. If you want to go back and look at the bill that was that created all this, it was 1164 back in 2022. I believe it was a Bardo bill, correct?
Yeah.
So if you go back and you was looking at the archive, committee hearings of that, in the very first committee hearing, Kathy Hare, for Center for Arizona Policy, a longtime anti-abortion activist, told them, the committee, that if Roe was overturned, because remember, that was a big question at the point in 2022 with that Mississippi case that, was still up in the air. She said, if Roe is overturned, that the 15-week ban would not go into effect and they would revert back to the pre-Roe law. So, again, back to me, it's like I was shocked with that ruling, and then I'm going back and reviewing the tapes, like, why was I shocked? Because it was always a possibility, and a very strong possibility, that this could have happened.
Dennis, if anybody who asserts that Kathy wasn't upfront about this is not...
Yeah, I'm not someone who praises...
Kathy was honest with everybody.
I'm not someone who praises Kathy Herod, but she's been pretty straightforward about this.
She's been straightforward about this. And frankly, Nancy Bartow has been straightforward about this. And to your point, I think you're the one who told me, John Kavanaugh told you what the intent of the legislature was. So going back to this point, and maybe Tony made this, I think it was a shock for the media, certainly the national media who wasn't following this and not having an idea. But for those people in the public policy world who were actually following this, it wasn't a big shocker.
I mean, I guess I could say it was shocking, but not surprising.
I think there's maybe certainly an error in my part looking at this more through a political lens than through any kind of a judicial lens, because say what you want about the people on the high court, the state's high court. They're not idiots. votes, and they had to know what the political ramifications might be, moving forward with the 1864 law. And a majority of this court was picked by Republican governors, not all of them, and most of them by Doug Ducey, I believe. So I think maybe that's where I thought they would find some legal way out.
I think you just made the point that the judicial officers were actually doing their job.
Well,
they didn't look at it through a political lens.
Because this is a political show, and it leads me into the question here. A couple of those justices up for retention this year.
Yeah.
They're going to pay the price. We saw the last election. Bill Montgomery almost got booted off the island.
They're going to pay the price. They're going to pay the price. And part of the thing that's happened here is you have Republicans who, trying to save their ass, made statements critical of the ruling too. So there's, if somebody's got money to go and try and remove these justices to try and balance the court, they're going to have a hard case. I mean, they're going to have an easy case to make. And, and I think that aside from everything, the Constitution does give the people the right to vote. Like, that's it. And so, and I think that if that is retained, that, no pun intended,
the irony,
that voters might remove these two, and then we'll have to see what happens.
I mean, the irony here, though, because I think you're sort of making this point, is that if we vote those two justices out, then you're voting them out based on an issue of which they ruled without politics. And so what you're essentially voting for is, I want judges who look through things with political lenses. And I don't think that's a place we really want to be. Mm-hmm. It's really taking an emotional, feeling and applying an irrational argument to it. But I don't disagree that the campaign is probably going to happen. I mean, I do. The question is, is there a counter campaign to that? And that's doubtful.
Let me sit with you, Marcus, really quick. And, I'm not asking, I want to be clear, Marcus donates a lot of time to come here and provide analysis on the show. And I'm not asking you to defend things. I want you to take us through what's the process for Republicans throughout the years? Because Stephanie Stahl Hamilton was pretty clear. She was the one who introduced that bill to repeal the 1864 law, but she's not the first lawmaker to do that. She says it went back at least 6 years, the past 6 years. What was the political thought process calculation from Republicans for just ignoring this issue? They had to know that the blowback from this would be almost like it is now.
I mean, to our earlier point, I think that they were a little surprised that I don't think they thought Roe would get overturned and go back to the states, number one. Mm-hmm. And number two is, the fact of the matter is, if you're in the minority and, if you're in the majority, it's very hard to get a minority party's bill moved into a committee. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really have to have and frankly,
right. So one of these Republicans could have put their name on it, though, right?
Like Matt Grass.
Sure. And
it still probably would have been hard. The committee chair probably would have blocked it.
Probably. That's debatable.
Yeah,
I won't go down that rabbit hole. I don't know how that would. Is
it kind of primary politics, though? Both parties have to deal with that. Primary voters, different kinds of voters than we see in the general election. But any Republican goes along with repealing that, boom, you got a primary with somebody saying that you're not tough enough on abortion, or you support abortion, right? Is that what was at play?
I think that's certainly an argument there. And frankly, we haven't gotten this far in the discussion, but I mean, my brain works a little bit differently because we've been doing this for so long. But my concern has always been, what's the net effect on Republicans? Meaning, we're already seeing part of that coalition from the 80s, if you will, the Republican coalition between the, low taxes, less regulation guys, Second Amendment guys, is a Christian coalition. And that Christian coalition believes vehemently that life begins at conception. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether any of us agree or disagree, or that's not the conversation. What I'm saying is, for that particular voter mm-hmm. that believes in that, what do they do now? What's their choice? Mm-hmm. And one of the Republicans' challenge, although they're talking about Democratic turnout, that's only part of the math problem. The other part of the math problem is that guy who this is the issue for him for 40 years, his entire life, he's been going to church every Sunday. What happens to him?
Well, and there's
a strong chance that those folks don't show up.
you might have seen the video that's just starting to circulate on Friday of a Republican confronting Carrie Lake at an event and saying, Arizona got this miracle from God that this total ban happened. Why did you change your mind? And she didn't do what her campaign has done and try to pretend like she never was in favor of this thing. And she sort of gave a very political answer, being like, I'm afraid that I'll lose. But I think when it comes to the calculation of Republicans, I mean, I think there's two things here. One is that the Center for Arizona Policy and Kathy Herritt are very powerful. They do a ton of polling. They do a lot of stuff, and they're telling all of these Republican legislators sort of where they think the public is. And I think that probably if I were to get it lucky enough to look at that polling, I would see that, it's not entirely accurate. And then the second thing I would say is, Marcus brought it up on the TV show. A lot of Republicans point out that abortion is like the 8th ranked issue when people are given, an array of things like what's the most important issue. And in my experience, that type of a ranking is not necessarily how voters are making up their mind, because it's not a heat map. It's someone saying like, yeah, I want to be able to pay the bills, right? And then it's like, well, what are you mad about? Well, I'm mad about the abortion thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is part of the thing, is they're looking at, they're like, this is like the 10th priority. Voters aren't going to care. That's not true. Your voters might not care, but it's going to, and I guess the last thing I would say is that, like...
by the way, just a point of clarification, I would never say voters don't care. I would never say that.
Right. Yes.
I'm just pointing out that the number one issue in the country is immigration. And this just ranks a little bit lower. It doesn't mean you don't care. Everybody cares.
Right.
And there's voters where it is their number one issue. That's how polling works.
And I think to the point we were talking about, it ended on the TV show, is like, the intensity of that. Where will this issue rank, come November? That's the important question. And I think there's a lot of evidence there that shows that, people are passionate about this. We know that the folks trying to put the ballot measure, get that on the ballot for November, clearly they've had no problem finding enough signatures to qualify. I mean, they just announced, about a week before this ruling came down, that they had over 500,000 signatures to qualify for the ballot. That's a lot more than the 383,000 that they needed. They're going to continue to collect those signatures until, July 3rd. I would imagine that this ruling, you're going to see a big bump in signatures as people probably try to seek out, instead of trying to convince somebody to sign their name, people are going to be going to eQual or whatever saying, where can I sign?
I think the other thing is that now the eyes of the nation are squarely focused on something that we've been talking about for the past couple of years. That's going to bring more resources in. That's going to bring more focus in. And so these campaigns are going to be better equipped, and they're going to have the money to go out there and pursue this in a way that maybe they. I think they're going to get 750 to 800,000 signatures on this thing.
I don't think anybody should worry about.
Right.
I have a lot of worries, but
right.
Dawn will tell you that she's been quite busy handing out petition sheets. So.
Absolutely. And so then that's the other thing about this, is that, like, this is top of mind. Mm-hmm. People, this breaks through. This isn't something you have to have an account on Twitter to find out what is going on, right? So your number two issue might be like inflation or job creation. Voters aren't going to be able to tell you what's going on in the legislature on those other priorities. They will be able to tell you what's going on when it comes to abortion. And so that's part of it, is like, there's not going to be a lot of education you need to do. It needs to be like, hey, you hear how they don't want to do this? Like, you vote for Republicans, they're going to want to get rid of abortion.
But let's stretch that out and go to the next step, right? Okay, so let's just say we get to the point where we repeal the territorial law and we go to a 15-week ban, which, to your point, Democrats don't particularly want to do, but are willing to go along with it to get to the ballot initiative. If that happens, the question, right. and some world issue happens that's big. We find out Osama bin Laden's actually not dead, and we catch him at the Arizona border with 10 dirty nukes. Whatever craziness it is. By
the way, that's going to be that clip is going to be on Mark Fincham's radio ad in the primary.
Does that change the excitement in the electorate? And I don't know, and you don't know, and you don't know. That's why we have campaigns, number one. I love it when people are like, well, only 20% of the people care. Well, that's why a campaign exists, to get that 20 to 51.
And also, like, I'm like, oh, they care, but like Democrats, if we win in this state, it's going to be like it's been the past couple of years. We'll barely win. And so, like, we are talking about the margins here when it comes to stuff. Like, you're right. Like, we don't know where this is going to go.
Yeah, well, all right. We're going to have to wrap it up right there. I said I was going to keep you guys here for about 10 minutes or so. We're far over that on this Friday.
But we covered a lot of
it has been a hell of a long week. A lot going on. So I just want to wrap up with this question. When you finally get done with putting everything to bed this week, what's the cocktail? What's the drink of choice? And Marcus, do not say Coors Light.
You know what I'm getting. It's a Bud Light. That's what it is.
Bud Light.
I ain't coming off of it. It's been going on for 20 years. I've got everybody lobbying me. Listen, it's my drink. It's impossible to get in trouble drinking Bud Light.
People aren't lobbying you.
Oh, it's so bad.
I went to Germany last year, so now I really like German lager, German pilsner. I like that. But I also, since I've had a kid, I just don't drink. I'll have like a beer and I'm asleep. Like it's.
Oh, you need a couple more and don't pick up that
I gotta
drink.
get over the.
Yeah.
I'll start drinking in threes.
I can see you over there in the German beer houses, singing the German songs in München steht ein Hofbräuhaus. 1, 2, 0.
I loved it. I loved it. And I was just like, how can somebody drink this? We had a beer like this, and I watched these guys drink 3 next to us, and my wife and I are like, what are we going to do?
You're going to get bombed real quick. Call your parents to pick up the kid. We're down.
Oh, yeah. I'm a beer guy myself, in case anybody wonders. I'll be unwinding.
What is the beer? Like, what should I go to, like, Total Wine and buy?
Oh, geez.
If I want a German beer that's good.
Oh, geez. There is one. I'll get with you after
text
the
it to me.
program. Yeah, I'll get with you after. All right, I want to thank you guys for joining us, pulling some extra duty, some overtime here on Politics Unplugged. Have a great weekend, guys.
You too.
You do.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I am joined with producer extraordinaire Colin. Thank you so much for joining us here. It's been a long week for all of us. Thanks for being back. You were on an assignment last week?
Assignment. Yeah. Yeah. The second line showed up on the little test is what the assignment was. Go home and sit on your ass because you have COVID was my assignment.
God, I'm really glad you're back. This whole week, I just want to get your thoughts. You've been watching this stuff come in on the news feeds, pulling sound bites, writing scripts, doing all the things producers do. Your thoughts on the big news of the week on the abortion ban being, reinstated that dates back to the Civil War. What's your top line thoughts, man?
I think it's been sort of fascinating watching how people have responded because clearly so many were not really prepared for this. And it showed up, and a lot of Republicans are falling into two camps on this. And one, you've got people like Kathy Herod or Jake Hoffman, who are
consistent.
Yeah, it's absolutely consistent. Tip your hat. They are absolutely consistent. This is what Kathy Herod has wanted all along, and she's got it. This is what people like Jake Hoffman have wanted all along, and he's got it, and he's standing by that. The number of other Republicans who have publicly been very supportive of a all-out ban, the 1864 law, now that they have it, are a bit like the dog chasing a car who catches it and has no idea what to do.
Yeah, and that's the metaphor that's being used. It's over and over.
Yeah.
Or the old, you could also probably use catch the tiger by the tail. Great, now you can't let go.
Yeah.
Or they're trying to let go.
Yeah. I mean, the notion that Donald Trump is now saying that Katie Hobbs has to help repeal this terrible law that he was fully in support of up until.
I mean, it's really weird. I mean, to say that like he's asking them to do him a solid in some respects.
Yes.
Because they have to fear that this could cost him Arizona a key pivotal swing state.
And trying to pin Donald Trump down on a single view on any issue is not easy, but he has certainly expressed support for an all-out ban in the past.
That was after he said he was pro-life, and I mean he's run the gamut on this.
Yes, he has.
Yeah, he's completely run the gamut, and I do think this is a very, very heated issue. I think will have staying power. And I do got to acknowledge, like we did the political rundown of the fallout and all this. We did try to get women to on the show. Unfortunately, some of the women we normally call that help us out with this show weren't available this week. But I from my conversations, this is a very maybe amongst the most personal political decisions
absolutely
of my lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, my mom is not a political person, and this is one issue where when you get to this point, she'll take it very seriously. Yeah,
and we've chatted about this before. I mean, before Roe v. Wade was overturned, it was always a moot argument.
Yeah. Yeah, not so moot anymore.
Anybody could go as far right or left as they wanted, or particularly right.
Yeah.
Because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was protected. It wasn't a reality.
Yes.
And now that it is, we've already seen the early, fallout results from that in places like Kansas and places like Ohio. Right.
Very red states.
Very red.
I mean, Kansas. Yes. You're not getting much more red than Kansas. No. And even in places like Kansas, you put an abortion issue on the ballot, and people support the right to abortion.
And it drove up turnout.
Yes.
People want access.
Yeah, and I mean the polls have consistently shown there is strong support for the right to an abortion, and when you crank it up to something like the territorial law, people don't want that. I mean the polls have shown consistently people do not want that draconian, for lack of a better word, that level of law.
Yeah, no.
So, yeah, Republicans seem to be facing a tough issue on this because it's going to mobilize Democratic voters. It's going to mobilize supporters of the right to an abortion. Mm-hmm. A lot of them now, in worrying about those voters, are now going to start alienating the far-right Republican voter, for lack of a better term, mm-hmm. the voter for whom abortion is a key issue and they support this law. They're not going to like seeing the people, the candidates they have supported, turning around and saying, "Whoa, wait."
And we're already seeing evidence of that.
Yes.
So
the video of Carrie Lake with the voter in Tucson this week. There's going to be a lot of that.
It's significant. Yeah. That said, if we can we pivot away?
Please.
It's been a long week.
It has.
Can we pivot away from something that's just the most? What's the most non-political thing you want to chat about?
You want to go Suns?
Oh, let's go Suns. I mean,
Suns or OJ, and I don't know.
No, I'm not. I'm not. No. Did you see the New York Post headline on OJ?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Finally, a real killer dead.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Oh. In a time when a whole lot of publications were kind of doing the mealy mouth, football star with complicated legacy passes away.
His legacy ain't complicated, folks.
Yeah. At least the New York Post went right there.
Not complicated. But let's talk about a little bit about the Suns.
So as we tape this, 2 games left?
2 games left. I think they're in the playoff. They have to fight through the play. I don't see them getting that 6th pick.
The 6th spot,
yeah, because they're going to need some help from to even get that. They'd have to win out and get some help.
They have 2 games left. The Pelicans have 2 games left. The Pelicans are a game ahead of them.
We own the tiebreaker. Like I'm on the Suns. The Suns own the tiebreaker.
The Suns, you would need the Pelicans to fold up and the Suns to win the next 2 games. Yeah. The first one could happen. As I recall, the Pelicans have a semi-tough schedule, and the Suns.
I can see the Suns,
losing
the next 2 games.
Have not shown that they care all that much.
That's the problem with the team. It's just I haven't seen a lot of giving a shitness from this team.
It's remarkable.
It looks like they don't enjoy their jobs. There's no joy in Mudville when the Suns play. It's been a frustrating watch this year and a big, massive disappointment. I think among the most disappointing sports seasons, I think, in Arizona history.
Yeah. I think the conventional wisdom, at least it was my view of the Suns going in, was if the big 3 are healthy and play together, they should be great. Yeah. It's a giant if. They all have their histories of things. Beal and Durant particularly, but if they were healthy, you would think, well, they should be in good shape. And they haven't been healthy all the time, but they've been healthy enough that when they are together, particularly lately, you think, what's going on here? I mean, when you hit a stretch, I think it was when they played the Clippers, they had the back-to-back against the Clippers. And the first one against the Clippers, when they're fighting to try and get out of the play-in and get locked into a playoff spot, you go down, 38-4?
Yeah, something like 35-4, 38. I don't know. It was bullshit. Whatever it was like.
How do you do that? That's and the Clippers are shorthanded. The second game, the Suns won, but I think they were behind with 5 minutes left, and the Clippers were playing their bench because they were all.
I think their top six
guys.
Their top six guys were like, we're not.
I mean, it was without Harden, without George,
their big three,
without Kawhi Leonard, and then also Russell Westbrook was out, and still the Suns squeaked it out. It's frustrating, and what's
a monumental fail. I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll be in the play-in tournament, and I could see them losing, whether it's 1 or 2 games in the play-in.
It wouldn't surprise me. They're not coming in on any sort of a high. You can certainly say that.
No,
they're not looking like a particularly competitive team.
No,
what a disappointing. And I'd love to see them turn it around. They've certainly got the talent to be doing better than they're doing.
Oh, talent's not the issue.
Yeah,
I mean the team has talent. They're just not a great team.
No, they're not. And I've been pretty happy with the way they assembled the team through the year. I mean, you knew once they had the big contracts they had that they kind of had to go bargain shopping for the rest of it in the bench.
5,000 people showed up for Kevin Durant's first press conference a year ago.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what that crowd thinks today.
Yeah. And
I hate to say it too, like, it's just there's no passion on the team. They're out of fucks to give, for lack of a better term. It seems like every time they play. We've seen some really strange performances over the years. With them getting blown out by the Mavericks and then the Nuggets the year after that. The one constant's Devin Booker.
Yeah, it's they come across as a weirdly passionless team. And I don't know how you fix that. I mean, the simple fix would be you bring in someone who will try and kick everyone in the ass, which is easier said than done, particularly when you're in their salary situation. But Booker seems to just be kind of a laid back, quiet guy. Mm-hmm. I'd never suggest he doesn't care, but you don't get the outward fiery thing that you get out of like a Jordan, that type of leader. You don't have the emotional, fiery, get on my back
Jordan
guys.
Jordan, who once punched out Steve Kerr in practice.
Yes.
It's a little extreme.
Yes, a little extreme. But even like the Draymond Green type, that seems like that's the type of person that
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
But someone who's fiery and will hold people accountable, because it doesn't seem to be Booker. It's not Durant, and we knew that's not Durant. Durant's one of the greatest players of all time, but he's not the fiery.
Well, it was Chris Paul last year.
Yes, who is hindered by the fork in his back at this point. I mean, he is the type of guy who will hold people accountable. It's just harder to do that when you're a bench player who misses half the season because your thumb hit someone's jersey, which seems to be every year.
Let's wrap up on this real quick then. What do you think happens over this weekend? You think they win both games, split them? Do you think they make that 6th seed, or do you think they're in the play-in?
I think they're in the play-in.
And
I'll go with a split, which might be optimistic, and they're in the play-in. And I mean, they're in the better play-in matchup where they only have to win 1 from where they are in the play-in. They don't have to win 2 to get in the play-in. You would hope they could do that.
I think they lose the rest of the games of the year. I mean, these aren't easy games, so that's my prediction. They lose both the next 2 games. They're playing games. They lose those 2. At me, man. At me, bro.
I will try to be more optimistic and say that they...
You have the monopoly of optimism here, sir.
I know. Not necessarily my nature. And the tricky thing is they're in the West. The West is brutal. I mean, once you make the playoffs, man, if they come in as the 7, so that means they're playing the Nuggets, the T-Wolves, or the Thunder. And God knows you don't want to play the Nuggets. No, I mean, even as unbelievable as Boston's been this year, I think the Nuggets will win the title until I'm proven otherwise.
I think Dallas is surprisingly.
Dallas is really
Has
good.
become surprisingly very good, and a team that could actually challenge the Nuggets.
And I think they're 5th.
Yeah.
So that's probably a later match for the Suns if it happens. And I've seen Suns Mavericks in the playoffs, and I don't need to see that again.
No.
And I like if you don't get the Nuggets, so you get the Thunder or the T-Wolves. I don't want either of those this year either.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's like just get us to the NFL draft, and let's hope the D-backs can turn it around at this point.
Yeah.
All right, Colin. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. See y'all next week.
See you then.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.